Welcome, everybody. We have a special little treat for both the Near ecosystem and the larger crypto space as well, where we're going to have a little DAO panel between Near's Jordan Gray and Aragon's Ivan Fartunov. Today, they're going to pretty much be discussing where they see the DAO space right now, where they see the DAO space going into the future, and then some of the bigger questions about, the fundamental value of DAOs and what people can expect to do with those things today. So just to get off the ground, why don't we start with introductions from both of you respectively, and then also just a little overview of what the DAO-focused product is that you both work on or work for respectively. Jordan, why don't we start with you?
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having us. Really excited to talk about DAOs. Day in and day out, DAO. So I actually started at Near Foundation about 7 months ago. So relatively new to the crypto space professionally, but actually got into it through running a nonprofit art and tech organization, having success with NFTs, trying everything under the sun to find out what would be right for our artists, and then really liking what I found at Near. And that included both just like the NFT tooling in the ecosystem, but also the communities and the DAOs, which for nonprofit organizations are a really powerful tool. So that's kind of like where I'm coming from. Previous to Near, I was at Google, shipping versions of material design for marketing pages. And before that, I was doing technology management for Fortune 500 companies, shipping web pages and apps. And yeah, that's pretty much me.
Great. Ivan, for yourself, your background, the company that you're representing, it's in the title, but I think just for the audience.
Yeah, I have like the Near thing here, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's better. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm part of Aragon. I joined about 3 months ago to grow the ecosystem around the project and to push for a more collaborative approach, both internally and like with other projects inside Web3. And that's like my mission within Aragon, both internally and externally, is to just focus attention on collaboration and coordination, because DAO infrastructure is all about doing things together, and like if the projects that are delivering this infrastructure can't do things together, it feels a bit out of whack. And yeah, so before that, I worked at a management consulting firm in the Middle East. I was helping telecoms develop digital ecosystems in esports and fintech. And I also worked with like a sovereign wealth fund on developing an ecosystem for electric vehicle manufacturing, which is pretty cool. Before that, I built the institutional lending side of the business, the institutional lending business of like one of the bigger lenders in Web3. It's called Nexo. So yeah, and even earlier, I worked in renewable energy and sustainability.
Very cool. Very cool. I think that's cool that both of your unique profiles respectively kind of have a amalgamation of different, engagements before getting into the crypto space. To kind of set the table for this conversation, perhaps we could start with each of you kind of introducing more or less the scope and function of the products that you work on. And then I have a question kind of about the nature of DAOs that can maybe kick off the conversation. We'll do that after the introductions. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I can go first again. And what I've been really busy with is shipping a new interface for the DAO tooling on Near. So Near has the Sputnik smart contracts, and for developers and people that have been around the ecosystem, probably familiar with those and how they work. The V2 of Sputnik allowed for things like custom function calls, which is a superpower basically. and also allowed for more flexible voting based on tokens or NFT, like holding those things, allowing you to be a member of the DAO, voting member of it. So what Astro is focused on is taking all of those superpowers and wrapping them up in a clean interface for people that are coming from the Web 2 space or who aren't necessarily Web 3 natives, so that they can take advantage of all that and be part of this work revolution that's happening. So that's pretty much it.
Great. Yvonne, for you and Aragon?
Yeah, so basically after the DAO, Aragon is sort of the OG of DAO infrastructure. We started in 2017 and have done a lot of things since. Obviously, as a lot of the infrastructure on Ethereum, we hit a lot of issues once our personal finance saw an upside with Ethereum going through the roof and like so much activity on the network. But before that happened, the Aragon client, which is a very straightforward framework for setting up DAOs, was very widely used. And then since then, we've been iterating on that. We've released some newer conceptual frameworks for how to run an organization, like Govern, which is like optimistical framework, which basically means assuming consensus as the default, and then like if there is disagreement, then you go to like either arbitration or voting by everyone. And the direction we are going is a bit more towards, okay, now we figured out like DAO tooling and coordination and governance tooling is too big of a chunk for anyone to try to handle by their own. So let's make sure we have a platform and a framework that is interoperable with things that other projects are building, either on Ethereum or on other chains, so that the DAO builders of the future can decide to do some things on Ethereum, some things on Near, some things on Polygon, some things on Harmony, like across, like we see a multi-chain future and like a multi-tool future, and we're trying to move towards that by working with a bunch of great teams in the space.
Super cool. So I think, as crypto becomes more present in, across different sectors of the economy, people look at these kind of acronyms and they're in these keywords like NFTs, DeFi, DAOs. They don't really know, much behind what it means, right? So like, what does DAO mean? Why are you going to DAOify an organization? What's the value of DAOifying your organization? Maybe some people in crypto have heard of, the DAO hack. For both of you, where kind of, if you could explain to someone who might not be super invested in the space, someone who's just trying to get like a feel for what to associate with the the acronym DAO and why it matters, what would both of you say respectively of the fundamental value lying beneath DAOs as an emerging technology stack?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think that what usually resonates with folks as I'm explaining it to them is just the idea of like a digital cooperative, usually kind of like strikes a chord, or also sometimes like something like a Facebook group with a bank account, playing into how people are used to kind of like interacting with each other today, and then also implying that there's like more than that you can do than just like chat and vote with each other, things like that. And then I'll also usually break it down into looking at like the terms themselves of like decentralized, autonomous. The organization part is easy to understand, but for the decentralization, I usually talk about how it's not just about the geography being distributed, but also how power is distributed, so that it's not about like there being a centralized power, bring the power back to the workers and the people who contribute, and that being like a significant shift that's contributing to the way that work is changing. And then for the autonomous bit, like that's like especially interesting to me because there's right now we're in a period of time where there's a lot of like decision making jobs that happen. Like that's a large amount of the kind of work that happens. But once you kind of look at the shape of the decisions that are being made and figure out a way to effectively codify those, then all those decision making jobs are going away. And that's the point where usually people are like, I don't know, I kind of like my desk job, but I think that that's really where the power lies, and that's really where the revolution is, and where we're going to see a turning point. And there's risk there. There's a lot to figure out as far as like how to take decision making and make it codified, because then when you're doing that, you're putting bias into the formula and things like that. So you really want to get it right, and you want it to be flexible, but also not hackable. So there's a lot to figure out still, but the pieces are there for us to really like step into the next revolution of work. And that's what is like the most exciting thing to me about what we're doing together with these tools. So that's where I usually leave off. Thank you.
Yeah, I love the digital cooperative. I think I'm using that quite a bit as well, because it's like a thing that people can understand and relate to. And the one bit I like to stress a bit is that it's a more equitable cooperative in a way, because like one of the big things that the crypto and blockchain enables is this realignment of incentives and across the board of human interactions, right? So when people think of traditional cooperatives, it's usually like, checking in capital into a shared pool, which like a lot of DAOs are doing that, right? It's like, we've pulled capital together, we're gonna farm, we're gonna ape into NFTs together and stuff like that. But there is a big part that's even growing in like exploring how you attribute participation into this decision making based on other types of contribution other than capital, be that labor, be that social capital, and those those aspects excite people a lot, because I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people in life are driven by financial incentives, and they just want a better life for themselves and the people they love. And if you are in an underprivileged geography and you can deliver quality work for a DAO, like you're gonna get remunerated handsomely in something that is a part of a community, and you share the upside of everyone doing things together. So that ownership and that more equitable distribution of ownership is really something that I find very powerful. On the autonomous stuff, there was a really cool way Kane from Synthetics put it, and I really like that. Which he was saying that like at the moment, autonomous is about being autonomous as an organization from external stakeholders and interests, as in everything that happens within DAO is decided by the DAO members. Like there isn't necessarily a court system associated with that, like an association, like a trade association or anything like that, right? It's like the community, the DAO itself decides what happens and how they do things. But to Jordan's point, I love the more like computer part of like automation part of the autonomous. We were having this internal discussion within Aragon, and at some point I was like, why do you guys assume we'll be delegating to humans? Like at some point, I'm just gonna have like an AI, and I'm gonna be optimized for this outcome. I delegate my stake, and then like that algorithm makes decisions based on the optimization objective I gave it, because it is capable to absorb a lot more input than any human being, right? And process it faster. So theoretically, for some types of decisions, I completely agree. Like machines would replace humans for certain types of decisions.
Yeah, and the composability there is exciting too. The way that you've got a well-defined input and output for a vote that needs to be made, and then the oracles that inform that vote. So it's actually like a very clean way of encapsulating things.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
like
also
like
the human nature that you're talking about, like the autonomous bit there. Yeah.
An interesting example I was thinking of, like back in my previous life, we were looking at like traffic systems in cities, and there was this idea of people in a traffic jam bidding to change the duration of the light, right? And that's something that people can't optimize. Like there is no way you can optimize for that. But like a machine knowing the traffic situation across your route from home to work can optimize like on which traffic lights you should bid the most, right? So like and then obviously like people that are part of the same community or work at the same company, they can like DAO it, right? Like they can be at different traffic lights bidding, so and making sure they don't bid against each other and stuff like that. So like it's possibilities are endless.
Totally different ride pool situation.
For sure.
Very cool.
I think on this topic of integrations is specifically interesting because a lot of times I think there's a tendency, at least in the crypto space, to think of the different tool stack as like not fully integrated with each other yet, right? So like people think of an NFT marketplace as being a place to do NFT stuff. They think of a DeFi platform as a place to, look for yield. They think of a DAO factory as a place to do governance. Maybe if both of you could talk about the ways that you see DAOs as, grand unifiers of this on-chain world, applications where, a game might use a DAO, or, a group of people might collaboratively invest using a DAO. What other kind of examples are you finding there's a lot of interest in from the actual on the ground development side? And then what examples do you guys think, excitedly about, like, this is something that's going to be super cool in the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah, from my side, one of the as we've been working on Astro and making it so that all of these things are really usable for everyday people. Just getting kind of the internal functions of a DAO figured out and governance and making that familiar is already like a task in itself, and that's kind of where things are at right now. Where the traditional things you think of a DAO doing, like those are available in a clean interface. And then what we're looking to in our next iteration is taking the custom function calls and figuring out how to make that something that is discoverable and allows people to do things that they wouldn't necessarily think a DAO would be doing. So like in not only the near ecosystem, there's a lot of dApps that a DAO can interact with through those function calls, but then also through all the bridges that are being built to Ethereum, Sol, Cardano. Like there's so many bridges that have already shipped and are in development from near to other places, back and forth. And I think that that's also a really exciting thing about working in the DAO space. Is like sometimes when you're working in crypto, there'll be like some tribalism and people being like, oh, my chain or no chain and things like that. But in the DAO space, everybody is very collaborative and very excited to work with each other. And the first thing everybody wants to talk about is, oh, how do we get our DAOs to talk to each other over the bridges? And I just really love that about the energy of the space and especially what's happening in DAOs right now.
I completely second that. Like that was the thing that got me, because I was like, wait a minute, everybody's like kumbaya, like everybody wants to do cool stuff and they're excited about what they're doing and they want to do it together, which like in other sort of subspaces of Web3, it's you don't really get that feeling of like let's vibe and be happy and create value together. It's like a lot of other sub communities see this as a zero-sum game and like I win you lose sort of thing, and like here it's everybody's like, I mean the police so massive that nobody is focused on bickering over the piece of the pie. Everybody's focused on growing it, which is really cool. But yeah, to get back into the actual question, what we're seeing a lot is obviously the capital allocation sort of DAOs, which is either NFT or DeFi focused. Certain aspects of that also relate to like demand for legal wrappers and things like that. But I think coming from not only the maybe not even the broader NFT space, but from the metaverse space, I think that's going to be a very, very interesting new niche from where a lot of demand for DAOs is going to come, because it's very it feels very natural, right? Like if you think of a gaming guild, like, I mean, leaving aside the fact that like a lot of teams, when they talk about substructures within their team, is about guilds, but like leaving that even aside, like within a gaming guild, you already usually have shared resources. You know, you have to you have like a common treasury. Sometimes you have to make trade-offs on which quests to pursue, and that involves collective decision. It involves shared resources. I mean, it's like it was built to be DAOified, right? So I think there's going to be a lot of that. I think on Jordan's point about cooperatives, I can see the emergence of a lot of digital work cooperatives. Like if you think of like places where you like sorry, like the job boards for digital work, like honestly, as a user of those, they're really awesome. But if I'm the person providing the value there, and I'm like, wait a minute, I have to submit a design, and then like the person that puts up the job picks one of 100, and only the one that gets picked gets paid. Like that doesn't seem cool to me. Like, right? So I think by enabling some sort of, by empowering coordination among creators of digital content, and that doesn't necessarily mean artwork. It could mean like people that build websites, people that build user experience flows, and enabling them to work together and ultimately ship out better things is powerful. Also, I think it will take away a bit of the need for this weird stakeholder that we've been having since the invention of the corporation, which is the investor, which provides capital only. And like, I think, I mean, not all of them, but like sometimes. So I think like the possibility to launch products and projects in the digital space relying on users, even if they're not paying, even if they're just like buying a part of what they would in the future use, is gonna be very interesting for the dynamics of innovation even in Web 2 as well.
Yeah, I love that you touched on just even that nature of work bit about like the idea of contests and just putting in basically spec work and not getting anything out of it. I love that DAOs can do things where there's incremental payments, and it's much easier to do smaller incremental payments than kind of like the old world idea of like, oh, you get paid once a month and all your work has to be wrapped up in this time period. Just the ability to look at a lot of the valuable work that's happening in the world and to reward it, like that's a very exciting aspect of it. Being able to oracle things like tweets so that you can like reward people for being part of the marketing, and yeah, being able to reward participation and then doing a bigger reward for the highest quality submission, things like that are all great ways of like leveraging the power of the DAOs. And I also love that I've been touched on the legal wrappers for DAOs, and this is something that is certainly up and coming and is going to be evolving. The other week in Wyoming for the blockchain stampede, I had the pleasure of wrapping up a spaceport DAO into a legal entity, which was interesting. It was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. The legal documents themselves were probably easier to parse than a lot of like DAO code, but it only took like an hour or two, and it costs $100, and you can domicile in Wyoming. And it's great to have those options for folks in the United States, but then also looking into like global domiciling with I guess Switzerland is doing work in that regard, where we're looking at that to get DAOs from all over the world some legal advice through the Near Legal Guild. And then yeah, there's just going to be a lot of options, because with the legal stuff, you're putting down things into law about systems that change more quickly than the law can. So this is something that's going to be evolving, and we'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, that's certainly an exciting interface. It's not just bridging between the chains, but bridging into the real world for, you know, DAOs that want to own land, or, you know, all the other things that they can do in the real world.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to get into a little bit of the notion of cross-chain community building. And I know that, Yvonne, on your part, that's a big component of Aragon's development plan. So let's hear some alpha. Or I don't know if you have any alpha on that front, but let's hear, you know, where is Aragon right now in terms of its kind of flourishing beyond Ethereum onto other chains, and what kind of a world do you imagine with Aragon on, you know, 6 or 7 different L1s in the next couple years?
Well, so, you know, in that direction, so we've launched on Polygon, and we're organizing together with 15 other partners. Near included this really awesome hackathon starting in 11 days. And so on the multi-chain side, there we have Polygon, Near, and Harmony as partners that would be building towards enabling DAO tooling across chains. Because I mean, ultimately, like the horizon that you mentioned, ultimately, in 5 to 7 years, like the average, if we do things well, and by we I mean not only Aragon, I mean like the space as a whole, if Web3 does things well, the average DAO user in 7 years is not gonna know what a layer 1 is. Like they're not gonna know which chain their organization runs on. They'll just know that things are being optimized on the backside for the trade-offs that they've selected as meaningful for them, and that's gonna be the user experience. Like I think, I mean, that's the way we see the future unfold. And then if you still need to know what a layer 1 and a layer 2 is to deploy a DAO in 7 years, we've done a shit job. Pardon my French.
Absolutely. Those are things that people shouldn't have to worry about. And yeah, love the plug for the DAO Global Hackathon. Super looking forward to participating in that, and the fact that there's going to be like not just that part 1 of like the 25th to the 25th of October to the 12th of November, that there's going to be kind of the different tracks that people can work on. And in addition to the cross-chain stuff, I'm really excited about the finance and operations track, and just again those touch points where DAOs are being integrated into the real world, because we have a lot of DAOs on the creative space that are interested in like being able to do print on demand or being able to pay for their subscriptions and things like that. So the FinOps stuff might sound boring if you just listen to the words, but when you look at what it's enabling, there's some really cool meaty stuff in there. And then also excited for, you know, part 2 of that hackathon, the DAO Global Hackathon, where it's more of an open track, and that's going to be running from the 12th of November to the 10th of December. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing what comes out of the collaboration space with all these awesome teams coming together from all these different chains.
And real quickly, just for an outsider's perspective here, what's the criteria to participate? What kind of people could get involved in this hackathon? What kind of, if I am curious but I don't know how to get involved, do I need a team? Any info on actually participating?
You go to the Gitcoin page of the event. You like there you would find a link to there is a special Discord. Like the partners, we agreed that like it makes sense to have a collaborative Discord where all the partner teams are present, instead of everyone trying to have like a sub part in their own Discord of like, oh, that's where we run it, right? So just in the spirit of collaboration, there is a separate Discord server with all the partners there, with like developers that already are interested in doing something. There is a find a team channel if you want to participate in a team. Otherwise, you can also run solo. just some alpha leak. There are going to be two different pods. They're going to be like a team player and a lone soldier one, depending on if you participate as a team or as a person, like as a single individual. So there's going to be some gamification there as well. And you just bounties will go live on 25th. You can hack on bounties pushed forward by the partners, or starting November 12th. You do whatever you think is needed for the DAO space, right? Like it has to be relevant to DAOs, but then there is no restriction on what stack you want to use. I mean, if you want to like hack away your own layer 1 and do DAO tools on top of that, and you can do that in 4 weeks, go for it. Like there isn't no strings attached. You can submit whatever it is, as long as it's a full complete technical submission. It enters the race, and as long as it's relevant for DAOs.
Sounds super cool.
It is.
It is. It's going to be awesome. And then some of the other tooling that's being brought to the table, like on the near side, are things like Croncat that allow you to schedule recurring things. We saw several projects at the last Near Hackathon take advantage of that and integrate it with DAOs. And then the streaming payment stuff as well is some tooling that we're getting integrated with the DAOs. And these are the first things that we're looking at from the custom function call point of view to integrate into Astro as being like tools that we see being useful across a bunch of use cases. So yeah, excited for this.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. So I think there is a couple of questions from community members who, if I'm in the crypto space and I interface with a lot of different communities, the question often comes up, you should DAOify your community, or you should DAOify your product. As you guys see it and where you guys are working, kind of what would you recommend to a community member that's in a community that wants to DAOify? When is it a great idea? When is it probably not necessary? And same thing goes for products. Do you see the future of Web3 products as all of them operating with some form of on-chain governance, or are there times when a product might not need on-chain governance? I think, giving those two options, feel free to take it whichever way you want, from the community side or from the product side. But I know people are, at least from the crypto side, are really interested in hearing what you guys think.
Everything should be a DAO. Come on, who are we kidding? I think that it's kind of the same advice that I give. Like, I speak with a lot of artists about NFTs, and what I always tell them is like, yes, you can do like the quick grab of like mint something and put it out as an NFT and be done with it, but really what's on the table is so much more than that. Like, an NFT is a smart contract, and really learning a little bit about that and what blockchain means and thinking about how that applies to your art practice will eventually give you like much more interesting and meaningful results than just copying what's already being done and turning the crank and calling it a day. And I think that, the DAO situation is similar. We've seen a few patterns for like successful DAOs of like being able to do the shared finances and farming and NFT collecting and things like that. And those are great use cases. But really, it's looking at your community or what you're doing with your product and seeing DAOs as another tool in your arsenal for whatever you're trying to get done. Like, if for community building, you need to incentivize something or get consensus or want to distribute power to your people rather than having to be a bottleneck in the process of throwing events or whatever else you're doing, then a DAO makes a lot of sense. And if you're in marketing and trying to do similar things, like for product development, a lot of the times your users are your most important asset. So to not be encouraging them to understand their stake in it and to see their value in the stake of it and to reward them for their participation, I mean, that would just be a huge loss. So I see it as a super valuable tool for, both the use cases that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I remember when I was in the Middle East, I did this slide about Uniswap, the retro airdrop, and I was like, from my perspective, this is the equivalent of PayPal giving you $10 to test PayPal, way back when, like 20 years ago, right? But today it's not $20, it's like, I don't know, whatever, $12,000. I mean, like sharing the value with early supporters is a very it's a very powerful tool to onboard early supporters and early users of whatever product you're building. But I completely agree with Jordan that you have to think about the community that you're building and the community that you want to build for over an extended period of time, because ultimately, and we've seen that as well happen, where like projects are like, oh yeah, we're gonna do a DAO, and then they don't want to give away control, and like it's like, okay, but like, I mean, really, that sounds like just that sounds like an ICO with extra steps, basically, right? And so you have to make sure that you have the right incentives in place, and like nobody really has that figured out yet, in my view. But there are a lot of projects that are on the right path of giving away control and sense of ownership to the community, so that you can really push forward a product in a meaningful way, as opposed to just, we have the product team, there is this community thing that's like sits somewhere there, but if you don't, it's sort of like you get what you give situation in DAO space, I believe, and the more you give to the community, the more you'll receive from them as a as a core initiator of that DAO.
And I'd also add on to that in a lot of ways, it's inherently tied to the real world. Like we're talking about some of the technical ways that it gets tied to the real world, but we're dealing with attention economies on all of these fronts. And that's one of the first places I see DAOs kind of like fall apart, or communities fall apart, is when the attention goes elsewhere. So that's like almost one of the first things you have to optimize for, is like, how are you going to make this worth looking at and being part of before you decide like, oh, I need a DAO? It's like, what are you offering? What's on the table? Why should people even care?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to Jordan's point on attention, it was really funny because like there was a point where every DAO thought like, oh, we should vote on everything, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Like nobody wants to vote on everything, right? Like there is voter fatigue and like decision making fatigue, and people want to be consulted when it comes to like meaningful things. They don't really want to be just sit there and click all day long on making decisions for the sake of making decisions, right? And yeah, like it's, sorry, I lost my thought.
Until we make a paperclip game version of a DAO where all you have to do is click on things and number goes up.
I also think about like when you look at it in hindsight, right? Like 10 years from now, they're gonna look back like, remember when DAOs first came out and everyone was clicking all the time for everything? Like how terrible that was, like growing pains of the tech. On that topic of growing pains for the tech, I think a lot of people associate DAO governance with token-based voting, right? So I have a certain amount of tokens. I can vote with those tokens on a proposal, or I can delegate those tokens to a certain person who can then vote on those proposals. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there, because on the one hand, you get the notion of like a protocol politician, right? Like a role where people delegate to this person to make decisions for them in a DAO. But on the other hand, you also kind of get people saying, well, we should look to alternatives to only token-based voting mechanisms. I'd be interested to hear from both of you kind of how you see that landscape, if there's any major problems you've kind of dealt with on that front, or what common solutions are that people are approaching to things like this.
Yeah, on the near side, we have a lot of active guilds and DAOs. Like we have over 100 active DAOs, but we don't have DAOs, I would say, with like the thousands of members where you start getting into risk of like Sybil attacks with tokens and things like that. And a lot of the DAOs or guilds are really relying on the seat-based voting and management of a council group, and then really just starting to look at the possibilities of the token-based voting and NFT-based voting. And in some ways, the NFT-based voting offers even more flexibility than the token-based voting. And that's where I'm excited to see developments. I haven't seen any like standout use cases where I'm like, this is the one way to do it, but I think that there's a lot of room to explore there, and that's where I'm like excited to see things go. Especially as like DAOs are bringing in this idea of like seasonal content and trying to keep people's attention, like make it so that you need an NFT every season that says I'm still here and I still want to be here, kind of thing. There's also a nice way of giving people a way to opt out that is healthy and encourages and doesn't punish people for opting out. Because I think that that's another thing too, is like it is great to think about DAOs for longevity, but not every DAO needs to live forever, and not everybody's participation in the DAO needs to be forever. So designing things in ways that allow for like not just easy onboarding, but also easy offboarding, and making both things positive.
That's like an awesome point. And actually, I just yesterday, so I was part of this course on how to DAO, because I mean I'm a professional, but I still like there's a lot of things to learn, and like obviously part of the space is like there's always new stuff coming up, and I just found out that basically in V3 of Molok they'll have a rage pause, which is a function that allows you to like signal to the rest of the DAO you're member of, like I'm taking a step back, like I'm still here, I haven't left, but like I don't want to be actively involved, which I think is really powerful in the direction that Jordan was mentioning of like you still want to be along for the ride, you just don't want to like commit actively, and giving that signal to the rest of the community sort of liberates them of struggling to keep you engaged, right? They know like, okay, that person is no longer interested, but they're still around. Like I think that like that level of thinking about the evolution is very important, because at the moment, good times, bull market, everybody's super interested, and then at some point maybe it's not going to be the case, and projects would feel like they're failing because like they're losing engagement, but it's just part of the cycles, and in we have those in any industry as well. So I think like having that offboarding experience or pausing is very important. And just on the token-based voting, it's like there seems to be a consensus at the moment that like quadratic voting is going to solve everything, and I'm inherently skeptical of silver bullet solutions, because from my perspective, like quadratic voting basically moves a lot of the collusion, just it moves it off chain. So instead of it being on chain, it's going to be off chain. Like that doesn't really solve all the problems. It solves some, but not all. So and to Jordan's point, like they're efficient systems for certain sizes of organizations that really make sense, where you have like this token-based voting on the aggregate, and then within that you have certain guilds that take care of certain like managerial functions, and managing those guilds with like expirable NFTs is something that I think is going to happen pretty soon. Like, I know the starting council is like the census there is based on an NFT that you get when you get voted in the council. I don't know if it automatically expires, but like I think that model is going to gain more and more traction.
Yeah, really cool. And especially when you consider that, again, NFTs are just smart contracts, so there's all kinds of things that you can play with there. And then also on the near side, there's a pretty interesting account system on near, where every single contract lives on an account. So having a DAO as either a sub DAO or a partner DAO, if they are sitting on each other's councils, is like a trivial thing to do. Just adding the DAOs to each other, or DAOs all the way down kind of situations are like, yeah, an interesting frontier. We'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah, for sure. Something else that I think is interesting on the topic of the protocol politicians is the idea of slashing, because I don't see that having emerged yet. And I was having this discussion with a friend, and we're talking about, like, you can draw a parallel between what protocol politicians are and what node operators are, right? It's securing the network in one case through validating transactions, in the other case through governance decisions. And especially if you get delegated voting power and presumably some incentive to execute that work, like, there has to be a slashing mechanism. There has to be a stick, because at this point we only have a carrot for the active participants in governance, and it makes sense considering the maturity of the industry. But at some point we have to, like, make sure that behavior remains in the best interest of the network.
Yeah, it's one interesting mechanism for getting people to actually show up to events, where you put in your pool money, and then everybody who actually shows up gets paid back out of the pool. If you don't show up, you forfeit what you put into the pool. So maybe something like that would be interesting, where there's some initial staking. When you make your commitment, you're like, I'm going to be here, and then if you don't live up to your promises, then there's some consequences. And also on the near side, we've got the idea of bonds. So anytime you submit a proposal, you got to put in the bond, just so that there's no, like, huge spamming. A little bit in those lines, but yeah.
Yeah, the closest thing we have today to slashing on Aragon's side is one of the other partners in the hackathon, UMA, helped us build those KPI options, where basically you're gonna get rewarded with options, and then if you hit whatever KPI you've had at the, let's say, the beginning of your term as a protocol politician, if you don't hit those KPIs, those options expire being worthless. So you can lose the reward, but that's still, like, only losing the upside. You still don't have, like, any downside yet. But it's work in progress. We'll get there.
It's a really, really interesting space, and I like that idea overall. But then also, like, the idea of, like, rewarding measurement too, because when you make estimates, it's not always about hitting the estimate exactly. And this is just my project manager nerd coming out, but, like, just being able to reward people who actually make estimates and then report on their estimates is, like, I'm interested in those kinds of systems.
So at the end of the day, we boil everything down to prediction markets, and that's that's it. Everything is a prediction market.
Love it.
So I know we're kind of running somewhat close to time as we start to kind of, like, look into where this space is going. Ivan, you said, there's a lot of carrots, there's no sticks yet. I think it's kind of fun to think about the DAO space today as where the DeFi space was in, like, late 2018, early 2019, even, like, where, like, people were like, what does DeFi even mean? You know what I mean? They really, like, didn't have any conceptual understanding of something that at scale worked. Where do you guys see this space going? How soon till takeoff? Like, we saw NFTs really take off, go mainstream. Are DAOs going to take off as well? Are they going to be, less impactful, more of a slow burn? How do you guys see the whole space emerging in the coming years?
Yeah, I see it as easily being kind of the next wave of interest in the crypto space. Like, Twitter doesn't even have a followable tag or category for DAOs yet, but you'll always get suggested NFTs. So I think that the growth opportunity is there and the excitement is there. The people that are on the ground working on this stuff right now have that burning energy where, like, this is exciting stuff. We're here because we can see the changes that it's going to make. And whether it's this year or next year or, a couple of years, next cycle, who knows? But my feeling is that as I've been working with people who aren't native to the crypto space so much, and like, introducing them to the concept of DAOs, and then kind of, like, as an aside to that, then also DeFi and, like, NFTs and other capabilities of Web3. I see a huge engagement opportunity with the folks that are just learning about these things for the first time. And seeing things like Wall Street Bets, I think that there's a culture, there's a zeitgeist where people are starting to see the benefits of collective organization and thinking, maybe I can be part of this. And now it's getting to the point where it's accessible enough that anybody who has that thought can like grab a wallet without too much trouble and then cast their first proposal and see how it goes.
I love that energy and ideas. I'm a tad bit more skeptical because from my perspective, like both DeFi and NFTs exploded because and became mainstream because there was like virtually unlimited financial upside. And that was the catalyst. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing because it brings money and talent into a space and it helps it grow and develop. I don't know when and how DAOs will find that catalyst to bring in the vast majority of newcomers en masse. Like that's why I see it more as a slow burn and more like DAOs being layered on top of DeFi and NFTs within the Web3, and then like trickling into the real world, people seeing actual impact into the real world. And that would be more of an unlock because I mean otherwise we would just come up with, I don't know, incentivized governance or something, and like again, like, oh, I'm voting on proposals, I'm getting like a 10,000% yield, and like that is for sure gonna bring in a lot of attention. I don't know how sustainable it is, and it feels like the DAO culture is a bit more focused on sustainable value creation.
Yeah, I really like that aspect of it, that it does have that focus. And yeah, I feel the slow burn, the points, and kind of to echo that and reinforce it a little bit, the DAO adoption and DAO interactions are very human to human. Yes, we've got all this on-chain stuff happening, but it is like it's something where it requires you to care about other people and to meet other people and to engage with other people for it to be successful and meaningful for you. So along those lines, I think that it will kind of like grow at that human scale of the way that things move through communities. And when you get a community leader involved, then they can bring their folks along too. So that's where I've seen like some of the growth spikes, and not like a 10x, 100x type of spike, but just like starting to see the communities really coming in numbers that weren't previously part of Web3 is when you get like the streamers on board, and people who are already organizing in the real world, and empowering their communities. That's where at least Astro, as we've been getting people on board, that's where we've seen a lot of success. And I think kind of I'll leave it at that. Yeah, I think that there's a good growth opportunity there.
For people wanting to read about DAOs, follow people who are deeply in the DAO space, watch content about DAOs, where did you guys start? Is it the kind of thing where you learn by doing, or what would you recommend to someone from the outside if they're like, I need to understand what a DAO is and I want to read, 5 articles or a book on it? Is there any formative materials on your part that help you guys understand it?
There's so much information.
Endless hours on Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. Crypto never sleeps. So just keep on absorbing. Don't try and understand everything at once, but just keep on absorbing. Two of the places where I point people right away is just like the nearguilds.com site, because it shows a lot of like viable use cases and a lot of things where somebody might browse past and be like, oh, I do like music or whatever else, web design, one of the guilds that exists. And that's a great entry point for people. And kind of along those lines, the open web sandbox is a great place for people who are individual contributors to kind of like get oriented. And besides that, like inside the space, there's so much to absorb. I really like the Forefront community for their openness, like their Discord. Like you don't need to own token to benefit from their community being part of it and everything like that. So their openness is like really cool to see, and they've got like daily recaps that they do. So I really appreciate what they're up to. And yeah, then just like finding the people on Twitter that kind of like resonate with you and making your own Twitter list, since there's not like a great follow list yet. Like Koopa Troopers like a great node of like information. He does a lot of like his own lists and points people at other people that are going off. And yeah, follow Astro DAO.
Yeah, like I think to Jordan's point, because we submitted a piece of like 15 use cases for DAOs, and that got a lot of people excited. So I think like the story of this is like someone who's taken the concept and applied it to a specific niche of life is very powerful, because people can relate to. And like when you have the more diverse set you have, the more relation points you have. And we we also have people who are like, okay, I like this, can I just fork that DAO? And like, and I'm like, you can fork the code, you can't really fork the DAO, because like there's the community aspect and like all those things. But yeah, like I think there are a few places. Twitter definitely forefront. I've enjoyed. There's a lot of podcasts on the topic lately, or specific guests. So Cooperative, Aaron from Flamingo, Orin from Gnosis. Like their episodes are usually pretty good. Bankless have really cool content around that as well. So yeah, just Twitter, follow some people, join some Discord servers, and then down the rabbit hole.
And come to the hackathons. It is one of
Yes.
those things where it's like the best way to learn is just to do it and start looking at the possibilities and putting your feet on the ground and checking it out. In addition to the hackathon, we've got NearCon coming up. So NearCon Alpha is happening in Lisbon, October 26th and 27th. And if you're not able to get to Lisbon, there is an online track as well, so you can participate that way. But yeah, that's my last CTA.
Amazing. And I just want to close by thanking both of you. I think that beneath every emergent trend in the crypto space are a bunch of very normally altruistic and hardworking people that just love what they're doing. So you guys are, I think, great examples for everyone else to see, like on the front lines. You had different backgrounds, you came into crypto, and you're making some serious contributions to the future of the space. So thank you both for your time jumping on today, and for the work you guys do. And we're definitely looking forward to the hackathon in about 2 weeks or so.
Awesome. Thank you for having us.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Take care.